Cybersecurity is about more than just technology. It's about how people behave with emails, data, and cloud applications that directly impacts your company's security posture. Security works best when it's ingrained in the culture of your organization. To learn how to build a security culture and transform your employees from targets into a strong line of defense, head to securityweekly.com/proofpoint and visit their Cybersecurity Awareness Center. Qualys has brought together vulnerability management and patch management, letting security teams discover vulnerabilities and apply patches immediately, all within a single, unified app. Sign up for a free trial of Qualys VMDR, vulnerability management, detection, and response today at securityweekly.com/Qualys. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to any of our podcast feeds and have all new episodes downloaded right to your phone. You can also join our mailing list, Discord server, and follow us on social media and our streaming platforms. I did the Security Weekly Unlocked one. You should go to Security Weekly Unlocked. It's securityweekly.com/unlocked, our in-person event. This December, we've got an awesome lineup, and we're very excited. Mr. Joff Thayer has joined us this evening, looking sexy as always.
Hello, Paul. How are you? It's good to be here.
What's going on, Joff?
Again. So it's been a little while. It's been a couple of weeks, I think.
Yeah.
So
Joff is my one of my go-to Python people. And we're going to talk about Python in this segment.
To phrase that carefully,
right?
It's
Python, the programming language.
Strong, huh?
And but I was teaching my intern, like, you need to start programming in Python, and I go to Joff. I'm like, I'm teaching the right way, right? Joff's like, yes. I'm like, okay, good. This is important. Right. This is
verified,
important,
right?
Yes, Joff. And you're speaking of teaching, you are teaching your regex class.
I am. And now
wait, is it regex or regex?
I always say regex.
I don't think that one to me doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, that's not like the infamous debate we had with Micah Hoffman over OSINT or OSINT.
I mean, Demon versus Daemon. I'm in the Daemon camp. Just that one I'll take you up on an argument with. But regex versus regex, I think tomato doesn't matter to me.
What are those moving pictures again?
GIFs or GIFs?
GIFs or GIFs. Now that one, that's a tougher one, I think. Right? I mean, some people come down on the GIF line. It's a thing. I mean, it's just the real thing. But anyway,
graphics.
Anyway, back to the point.
GIF. Yes.
I am rolling. I just love doing this so much. We're doing regular expressions, your new lifestyle. It is something that I have taught. It's just a one-day thing. It's 4 hours. We've done it 2 or 3 times this year. It's so much fun. When
is this one coming up? What's the date?
It's October the 26th. So I don't even know what day of the week that is. Let's see. If we looked at a calendar, we could probably tell what day of the week that is, which means I would have to find a Unix prompt, because what is the favorite command line for getting a calendar in Unix? Anybody? Bueller?
Is it? Hold on. Is it cal? C-A-L.
It's cal.
Cal. Yes.
It is cal, right? And you got
which is not calculator.
Right.
No,
it is not calculator. Right? So I'll do a cal of 10 2021 here on my Unix prompt, which is running under WSL, and I'll find out the cal's not installed. Darn it! Anyway, somebody will tell me.
So you just wasted.
What is the calculator command in Linux? Anyone? Unix. What is the calculator command? There is a command.
Calc. CALC.
Also,
or are you talking about BC?
BC. There you go, Lee. BC is what I was looking for.
Yep. Yeah, BC for the win, or XCalc if you're feeling really lame. But
very good job. Very good.
Had to go there. Anyway, we do 4 hours of regular expression fun. It's multiple language. It's regular expression fundamentals to begin with, and then we dive into a little bit of Bash and a little bit of some little bit of Python thrown in there. There's a little bit of PowerShell thrown in there. Just a little bit of everything. A little bit of awk, a little bit of grep. I mean, just a whole bunch of fun. But I've had students come out of the past class saying they use the knowledge immediately that day and got ahead on some sort of sim search or Splunk thing or whatever they were working on. They were just super, super happy. So we did cover a little bit of log analysis in there as well, because, what's log analysis without regex, right? Or regex. There we go. So
So I went to blackhillsinfosec.com. I clicked on learn and went to training, and very quickly found the link to October 26th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. You can pay $25 to $125.
That's right.
And spend, is it 4 hours, did you say?
4 hours.
4 hours. 4 hours of your life learning regular expressions that you're going to, if you work in this field, you're gonna use these. You can use these because the regular expressions are in everything. They're in everywhere.
Look, and it doesn't matter if you're a developer, if you're in IT operations,
right.
If you're, incident responder, if you're in InfoSec doing forensics. Like, regular expressions are a skill that you can absolutely use day one coming out of the class. So, $25 to $125. Pay what you can. If you've got an organization that's willing to pay money, then we'd like it if you go to the upper end. But if you're by yourself, $25, right?
Like regex is one of those things where you're like I understand it a little bit, and when I need to do something, I go to Stack Overflow or some other websites, and I figure out what I need to do, and I don't really understand the more advanced stuff, and I kind of just fake it until I make it. Really. But now you can spend I think this is 4 hours well spent, so that moving forward in your life, you've got a little deeper understanding of regex. That is $25 to $125, very well spent, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Paul. And it's really a lot of fun. It really is. And actually, more importantly, you come out with the fundamentals. So it doesn't matter what programming language or tool or whatever you're using.
Right.
When you got the fundamentals of regular expressions, you're good to go. So,
outstanding. Let's talk about
by the way.
Oh, yes, Lee.
Joff gets so excited about regex, he gets like a foot taller when he's teaching it. Got to be there to see it.
Lee knows this firsthand experience when I used to do it in the Python class, because that was actually my very favorite section of that class, to teach the regular expressions morning.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
The energy is awesome. How about the news? And very cool.
I want to talk about the Facebook outage a little bit, because I think that there has been very few times when I've looked at a major news article and news event and read what's out there and just gone, you guys and gals have no understanding of how DNS or routing or BGP works, and you're trying to write about it, and you're really doing a disservice. I give a lot of passes for journalists. If they come close, I'm like, God, I get it. Like you're close, and I get the gist, and that's cool. But so many articles on this one, we're not close at all. And I'm like, I can't give you a pass. Most of the articles I read, I'm like, I'm not giving you a pass on that, dude. I'm just not. They removed the global DNS routing table. I'm like, no, but DNS and routing are two different things. I can't give you a pass on that. I'm sorry. You don't get one.
Yeah. Well, and it got actually worse, because there were articles coming out going, well, Facebook basically is the internet, right? I'm like, what?
No, they are not. They may do a lot of things on the internet themselves, whereas many other companies might use other hosting providers for things like that. And I get that. But still, the reporting was wrong. And the way it was explained to me was that, they had scripts to affect the BGP routing table. And my assessment is that there's probably only a very small number of people at Facebook that actually understand BGP. I think there's only a certain number of people left in the world, right, that really truly understand. I was going to say,
at Facebook itself, here's my guess: one maybe
person,
two,
right, maybe two people, and the people that are using those scripts, they're really smart too. I don't want to take anything away from them, but they're not the one or two people, as you said, Joff, right, that really know BGP. You had to read what is the paper by Sam? There was a paper from someone at Cisco. His name was Sam Sam something, and his last name began with an H. When I was learning BGP, all the guys that were
Sam Harris?
guys and gals that were CCIE
Yes,
certified, and I was like, I want to understand BGP. They're like, you have to read this person's paper, and I did that. And what's funny is I made changes to BGP, and I totally effed up. Like, took us right off the internet. Right? And I'm like, wait, but I read the paper, and I still took us right off the internet. And that is my assessment of like what happened, right?
Right.
I tell you, when you get really elite, I've got a blog out there, probably still to this day. I need to actually go find it, that talked about BGP security fundamentals. And when you get really elite and you start getting into prefix filtering and actual prefix, specifically prefix length filtering to control your route table length and all kinds of things like this. Now, BGP is a complex topic of its own, and you need to to do it right. And I give a lot of credit to the really high-end network professionals, because they are actually both infrastructure security specialists and routing specialists.
Agreed.
Right? It takes some serious good work to do it right. There's plenty of stuff done wrong, of course.
Right, but the prefix filtering is done at the ISP level, so I can't advertise routes for IP address space that I don't own. Essentially,
no, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. That's not true.
That is not true. But
that
go
is
ahead,
not true.
Josh.
As a matter of fact, that's how the Chinese actually stole routing of half of the internet through China for quite a while, for 20 minutes at a shot.
Because the ISP did not have appropriate filtering, or customers of the ISP didn't have appropriate. Like, where does the filtering lie?
Well, BGP is a trust system. So any of the ISPs that participate trust that the upstream or downstream is going to advertise the correct set of prefixes.
Gotcha.
That's built into the system. There is no way to change that, and so it is possible for a provider on the internet to act as a malicious provider. Now, it's very easy for a peer to say you're being malicious and just to drop that peer, very, very quickly. But it is. But that requires
people skills rather than configuration.
Yeah, it's people.
Yeah. Well,
it is people. Yeah,
but it's
absolutely on a trust basis.
There's been a movement for a couple of years to adopt a standard where the BGP updates would be signed, so that you knew you only were getting legitimate updates, as opposed to some man in the middle putting out updates. But
wait a minute.
I don't see any value in that.
That's like DNSSEC.
It is like
it's DNSSEC. Still DNS. It's always DNS.
Everyone has to adopt it in order for it to be effective.
Right. That's the problem.
Right.
And I don't see any value. Yeah. I don't see any value in that, because BGP is a distance vector protocol, which means it is link to link to link, and so your neighbor or your peer, in best practices, is going to be A, trusted, but B, will use point link to other point-to-point link authentication on those updates, and so signing the updates on a link that is trusted and authenticated doesn't really add a whole lot.
Redundant to you? Like I said, it does, but that's, like I said, that's I kept running into that the last couple of years when they talked about malicious BGP updates. In this particular case, it was Facebook's own update that was it would have totally passed all the security and trust.
Well, yeah, they cut off the branch they were standing on, from what I've been told.
Yeah, I mean, you can screw up. You can screw up BGP easily, right?
Easily.
Then you compound that with remote work and building automation being tied into local networks that authenticate via a domain that's not accessible. I'm just curious why that update happened at that time.
The real lost art in the internet today is appropriate layered dependency analysis. That is what's biting us.
But does that mean, Jeff, hosting your DNS outside of your own network, so when you make that mistake, your DNS still survives?
That's how Twitter does it.
That's what got me about the Facebook thing. Is like, I get it, they want to own all of their own infrastructure, but that means you're responsible and you own all of your own infrastructure. So when you screw it up, it all goes down. Whereas if I have a trusted DNS provider, even if I screw up my BGP routes, like my DNS still works.
There's a lot to that. That is strategic forward planning.
Yeah.
And strategic forward planning involves architecture decisions
Mm-hmm.
and real thought. And it is about operational and security coming together,
Mm-hmm.
which we have said all along. If you encounter, and I have encountered this, architectures that are thought from the ground up as both secure and operationally resilient, you cannot hack those easily. They are well thought out, and they are going, you're going to look at that and go, oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
so there's no creds I can get to, and like there's no denial of service because you got layers of redundancy, and right, and you start putting it all together, and
What I love too is that it was about routing protocols, which I think we don't get enough. Other distance vector OSPF is also a distance vector.
No,
It's a
OSPF is
lost art. There's not that many CCNEs or even old school CCNAs that had to go
But
through
wait,
the trouble.
OSPF is not a distance.
no
vector.
OSPF is multicast
Open
based
shortest
link
path
state.
first.
Right.
OSPF is link state, which means every router in the network in OSPF has to have an up-to-date picture of the entire network.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
Okay?
Right.
It's a Dijkstra algorithm based implementation.
And now what about RIP? Remember RIP?
RIP
RIP
is
was
distance vector.
noisy.
RIP is
Right.
distance vector. A BGP is distance vector as well, which means it is neighbor to neighbor how the route tables transit. So yeah,
I really miss like working at the university and being exposed to all the routing protocols because it was just so cool. It really was. It was so much fun.
I have to say one of my favorite things that I don't miss, being in the operational side of the house and having pages and phones off. It was, in the 90s, it was pages.
Sure.
Right? But one of my very, very favorite things was when I actually had to participate in BGP and I actually had to engineer redundant links to the internet in an intelligent way to survive, physical and electronic outage. And I did it right.
But
we
not just the internet. You had also had to do that for internet too as well, right?
That's right. And we actually had a physical cut, and the university was fine. The other links stood up. The routes all rolled over where they should have. It was, and I had load balanced the traffic. I mean, it was actually a really cool trick to be able to do that.
It is. It's an amazing feat of engineering. It really is. To your point, my teenage son was like, "What's a pager?" Like, oh my god.
It is. Tell him. Here's the answer. Tell him that it's a device that uses a very wide band of spectrum, and if you have the chance to analyze it with your Hacker RF1 or similar gadget, then it would be a learning experience for you.
Well, another big news: Twitch had a data breach of to the tune of 128 gig.
Completely pwned, right? Source code the whole smash.
But not a lot of like PII from what I understood. More like their source code and what each streamer made in terms of revenue.
Well, there's a ton of stuff in there. So it's not just this is an actor that's been in the network and multiple business units for a very long time.
Right? To collect 128 gig.
Yeah, you've got business analytics, you've got the HR side, you've got even IT and operations information, you've got credentials, you've got databases and source code. All of these pieces are different business units inside of Twitch. So the dwell time for this actor and the reason behind it, I mean, it was 4chan that did this. So the reason behind it is very, very interesting.
Yeah, like why spend that much time in Twitch? Like, what's the
why release it for free?
Like, why?
Yeah. So Tyler, could you put a little bit of extra depth around the reasoning as you understand it?
They really hate the content that is being pushed out, and maybe there might be some racist connotations inside of some of that.
Oh my. Okay.
Well, racist. How?
Well, I wouldn't go as far as racist. Like, there's some speculation around the racist. So 4chan was pissed off about the scum that was being released and what they're getting paid, and how Twitch was streaming all of this info and paying out without divulging some of this to other networks. Then apparently this data was made available to private entities that were competitors, and someone just came out and said, all right, like, we're just going to leak this for everybody competing against Amazon, right? So there was some interesting things about who was actually using the data, what competitors they had, what information and how much they were being paid, and then the type of content being released on the platform. And there's the hate raids, which were happening, which is an entire kind of different side of this, which goes into people raiding different channels and dropping like stupid stuff during streams for different channels.
Oh, wow.
So that were they not policing their content well enough?
No, they're not, definitely not policing any of the content. They're not monitoring any of the competitors and like what's being done to disrupt the service. And then again, there's a bunch of stuff around channels getting rated and the demographics with inside of those, but that's all kind of speculation with inside of some of the hacker forums. Like there was a bunch of hacker wars going on.
Yeah,
outside,
but there was no one making any like real money on it. Is that true? Like,
what?
No,
Twitch?
I mean on the content that they dropped. No, they dropped this for free as kind of an FU.
No,
to
but I
everybody.
mean like in terms of what, how much money the streamers were making.
Oh,
like,
based on like
some of
the
them make
revenue
a lot of
coming
money.
in, no. Yeah, the streamers were making, I mean, they were making a lot of money. They were in the millions, but it was not a lot of money in comparison to other platforms.
Yeah, like I heard like
And in
2,000, like you can make 2,000 a month on Twitch. Is that the high end?
Yes, I mean, some of them were making over 180K. Some of them were making $1 million. So some of their top performers were making a lot of money, but it's still not a lot of money in comparison to
YouTube?
other platforms.
Yeah.
YouTube, not even close.
Not even close, right? Some of those YouTube personalities make a lot more than $1 million a year. Right?
Oh yeah, you're talking 800,000 plus a month at a minimum, and that doesn't even include some of their sponsorships. So again, whether or not that's racist, whether or not that's platform specific, whether or not that's based on the content that Twitch is putting out, there's kind of a lot of theory around like what the full motivation behind that was.
And wasn't there some sort of a strike by their streamers too because of certain of the hate raids or something?
Yeah, the hate raids were the big strikes.
Oh, so people like raid someone else's channel because they don't agree with the message on their channel and put all kinds of crap in it. But when you raid someone's channel, doesn't that help their channel to get more viewers?
No. There's a difference between a raid where you're bringing viewers to the channel and a hate raid where a lot of these are just bots that spew racist, nasty, whatever crap.
Yeah, you can't get any of the good content in the chat or any of the interaction.
So you lose your legitimate followers because of the hate raid, essentially. Yeah, I guess.
A signal to noise ratio issue by the sounds of things. Yeah,
exactly.
So it's
it was interesting day timing.
But meanwhile, back at Facebook headquarters, they're like, "Whoo, the camera's off us."
But also the thing, there's a Facebook whistleblower, right? I mean, this was another aspect of the story, right? There's someone who worked at Facebook that was pointing out I don't know what she was pointing out, right? It was some unethical business practices at Facebook, and this outage kind of coincided with her testimony in front of Congress. Was it?
So you had that. You had you had a bunch of things happen. You had that. You had the Pandora Papers, which were released by Washington Post in collaboration with the open source journalists, freelance, whatever their acronym is, that went into all of the offshore accounts and how people are doing like money laundering, tax evasion for the rich in high positions of power. Then you had the WhatsApp breach, where all of the WhatsApp SMS chats like could be decrypted, and there was a bunch of stuff with inside of that breach that was private that actually wasn't released publicly yet. You can purchase it, obviously. So there was a coinciding of like 7 or 8 different events that happened like all within the same day.
Interesting.
That woman that was testifying about research around the impact of both Facebook and Instagram on children.
That's right.
Yeah.
And sounded like she was advocating for more censorship on Instagram and Facebook. part.
Yeah, censorship, or I think generally regulation, right? There was a
mental health. Yeah.
And she may well be onto something, but the coincidence makes you think there's some other agenda here, perhaps. So there's a podcast, right? So we can speculate.
That's what we do.
Yeah, it's what we do. That's right.
The interesting thing I thought is that early in the day, one of the Facebook engineers posted on Reddit about the BGP issue, and then like an hour in, or maybe a little more, that whole Reddit account got deleted. Apparently, he was speaking out of turn.
There's a lot of speculation around like the correlation of these events, like what prompted them to do this specific update at this time, and like how is so they have backup and failover safety nets in place for the script for BGP in order to isolate islands, in order for failover events, isolation, and or incidents. This is typically not able to happen without a bunch of overrides, and it's not able to happen at this scale without a serious override. So why do this update at the time? Where were the backup safeties, and how did this kind of all coincide with a lot of what was getting released? Like you had WhatsApp breach, you had the Facebook Pandora papers, you had the Facebook research. I'm not much for conspiracy theories around this kind of stuff because BGP is hard and like people mess it up. But it seems like a very large outage for a simple mess up.
Do you know, as a former engineer of very, very large networks, do you know what the backup safety is on a Cisco device?
You save. Hold on, no. I know this one. I know the answer. You save the config file to a clear text file on your desktop.
No.
You had the periwinkle blue cable in your bag with the floppy disk.
That's one option, but the true save your butt is the reload in 15 command, which means if you make a change on a Cisco device, it is immediately active. First of all, there is no commit phase. It's immediately active. If you screw up and it's a route table change, you don't have the opportunity to write that change to flash because you'll probably cut yourself off. But if you put the reload in 15 command right before that, the device will reboot itself and restore its configuration from flash, which you have not written over.
Right.
Hopefully haven't written over.
I know there is a whole load of network engineers that are going to listen to this and go, Joff is totally right.
You're spot on, dude. You're spot on. Yep.
Because I can't tell you how many times I learned that lesson, A, the hard way, and B, that was like the number one command before any major change. Right?
Let's I want that up. I just want to go to something, talking about networks and routing, something more esoteric that I think is kind of, I love covering these stories on the show because exfiltrating data from air-gapped networks has created such amazing content and also represents creativity and innovation that is unrivaled from what we've talked about. And it's just amazing that we see this research largely coming out of universities on how to exfiltrate data, right? We've seen changing the fan speeds, the LED lights through monitors now. And most, all of us on the show, most of us listening probably know that when you send data through even a network cable, that there's RF emissions from that cable, right? It's basic physics. And so this attack is dubbed the LANtenna attack that enables malicious code in air-gapped computers to amass sensitive data and then encode it over radio waves emanating from Ethernet cables as if they're antennas. I think a lot of us have used a cable as an antenna. It's physics. It's basically physics.
Yeah, these guys are real hackers. We've lost our edge. This password spraying and other BS. We need to get back to this edgy shit that's pretty cool. I really want to know how they figured out the attenuation on twisted pairs, because I know I've pulled some cables and stretched that attenuation out quite a bit, so my calculations would be off.
I mean, to build a device that can actually pick up on the fluctuations and then retransmit. That's really cool work because we know. I mean, we in security will even say, right, go ahead and plug your device in. In fact, when I'm hacking, I'll tell you right now, I don't hack over a wireless network. I don't.
Yeah, you got to plug it in.
I plug it in, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what this is saying is, okay, big deal, Smarty Pants. We still got you, right?
But but also, I don't. From what you just said, I don't know how I came to this conclusion. But like, what if you have a shielded twisted pair cable? Does that how much does that shielding in a cable that's, for all intents and purposes, meant to be buried underground, right? And that shielding helps protect it. But how much does that shielding actually prevent the radio frequencies from emitting from that cable?
Hold on, I'm going to go buy some stocks and shielded twisted pair now.
Right? Because it's not that, it's not that much more expensive. So what are we saying? Like, could we now, based on this research, be seeing places that have a very, very high security level going, every Ethernet cable has to be shielded twisted pair because it prevents those RF emissions from coming from the cable?
I mean, there's already a fix for that, Paul.
What's that, Lee?
There's already a fix. They don't use copper.
Yeah,
those
use fiber.
Data centers do not use copper.
Yeah, because if you use fiber, you're right. That would fix this.
Yeah.
You're talking about the Tempest style issues. Remember Tempest back in the day of CRTs?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Oh, so in a CRT, there was an electron gun that shot the letters onto the dust, the phosphor dust on the screen. And if you had a Tempest receiver, you could actually figure out where the electron gun was and recreate the letters on your screen that went on the other screen. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine, Dan Woolley, has a famous story about this. It's now 50 years old, so it's probably unclassified. I'll screw it. He actually, the first time Rand Corporation brought a PC to the Pentagon, the chief of staff for the chief of staff for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, it's weird, but you get the idea, was like, oh, I'll use it, and typed up the schedule for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which is a classified piece of data. And he's like, Dan was like, this is wrong. There's something wrong with this. They're like, no, it's totally safe, the Rand Corporation salesman, because as we know, it's 100% secure. So Dan took a boat in the freaking Potomac behind the Pentagon, had a Tempest receiver, and a couple hours later, beached the boat, walked into the Pentagon, handed that guy the schedule, said, how the hell did you get this? And they explained, and they're like, okay. So the Rand guy got his computer back. But since it had classified information on it, does anybody know how he got the computer back?
As a brick.
In small pieces? In small pieces? Yeah.
No, in one piece. In one very, very dense, very small brick.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah.
So look, you're talking about Tempest receivers and OMG cables and things like that.
Yeah.
Every time there's a cable, there's a way to get something out of it. Every time there's an emission of any sort, there's a way to get something out of it.
We go back to that supply chain attack.
But hold on. My question is, do you have to compromise the air gap network first in order to collect this information? Or if the network is operating completely air gapped, I just need to have a listening station? I think there's a big distinction in these technologies, right?
Paul, like, is it hard drive lights?
What's that?
Has anybody told Paul about the hard drive lights?
No, well, but I agree with the hard drive lights, right? But like some of these attacks, I think, are dependent on me as the attacker having software to create the back channel. But some of these attacks can also like just organically collect that information, and that's a big distinction, because that means
you got a proximity problem.
In some instances, I have to use physical attacks and or social engineering of some kind, or a combination of both, to be able to put some software basically in the air gap network to exfiltrate data. Other attacks, I can organically collect that data. Yeah, we need to make that distinction. That'd be a great talk, by the way, to talk about. That'd be a great talk. Yeah. Talk about all these attacks and make that distinction between them.
Right, because if you're talking about the Tempest receiver that Josh mentioned, or picking up Bluetooth signals that aren't encrypted, say between the keyboard and the computer. Actually, most of those aren't encrypted anymore. You just need a receiver that can pick up the signal,
right?
And the signal to noise ratio has to be right. If you're talking about a lot of the things where they're blinking the hard drive light, modulating the power, modulating the Ethernet cable, that needs malware on the computer to take action so that you can to get the pattern out. So there's really two styles. There's a lot of work that's been done on the transmission security side to minimize that. The malware introduction, that takes a little more, care and caution, although there's a lot of controls for that. But depending where you are, they may not be as robust.
The amazing thing for me, too, is that some of these attacks are independent of any encryption methods that you put in to this data.
Well, I was about to bring that up.
And have any of you folks read Code Girls? About the World War II code breakers?
I haven't read it. I'm aware of it.
Amazing. I'm listening to it now, and I know Larry has been listening to it. And I just want to say, I don't know if Larry conveyed this on the show, but I'll convey it. Amazing book. Like, just absolutely from a world, like stuff about World War II that really helped put it in perspective, coupled with security lessons that we still need to learn today. Like, just amazing. Like stuff about secrets where, the secrets are really about how we broke the code, but also like how we collected the SIGINT to be able to break it is also a huge secret. And I think that kind of plays into our thing. Like how we collected that, like they would get communications, but they would have to set up listening stations that collected those radio communications to bring it back. And it was encrypted, and how the encryption changed, and how also like the whole like tactics and strategies for the U.S. to build teams of people largely comprised of women, because the men were sent overseas, and the whole sexism thing is really kind of like, it puts that in perspective, in how they did the recruiting, how women were treated, and how women were paid less than men. But a lot of the women were just absolutely brilliant. They're the ones that broke the codes that we used to save lives during World War II. Amazing book. I highly recommend the book Code Girls. Really awesome.
So we'd be remiss, though, if we didn't mention that there are some layer 2 solutions that have been around for a while, MACsec 802.1ae, that look at bridge point-to-point, right? Layer 2 MAC address layer encryption, and several vendors have been after that. It's a difficult problem because the key distribution issues that exist, but that potentially can help, because if you encrypt at layer 2, you're not reliant on the layer 3 protocols doing their encryption, and whether we like it or not, there's still layer 3 protocols that are plain text. So.
Yep.
Where do we want to go next? Oh, let's talk about insulin pumps. Medtronic has actually, this to me is a huge win, by the way. Medtronic has recalled insulin pump controllers over life-threatening flaws. These life-threatening flaws are security vulnerabilities. And my whole thing is like, I remember years ago, Jay Radcliffe, right, talking about these flaws, kind of with the device manufacturers. It felt to me like the message wasn't resonating. You fast forward to today, the FDA has noted that, like, hey, look, we forced them to recall these because of a security vulnerability. And to me, that's a huge win for all of us in the security community to know that, like, our efforts are now being recognized as a health and safety issue where devices are recalled, not because of a defect that's kind of I think there are defects certainly that are unrelated to what we would call security. These defects are very much related to security and have forced a recall on these devices because they have vulnerabilities. the huge takeaway for me in this article is like the huge win that we have as a security community, that we're pointing out flaws that we see them as security flaws, but also as health and safety. And now we've gotten the FDA and manufacturers to see them in the same light. To me, that's a huge win.
I mean, I'm going to say yes and no. Okay. I agree it's a huge win from a philosophical point of view. However, if anybody here uses a CPAP, the Philips DreamStation recall is a bloody nightmare, because they're like, oh, well, you've got a CPAP that could kill you. Okay, for a medical reason, by the way, not an information security reason. But you're supposed to buy a new one every 3 to 5 years, so we're not going to replace yours. And everybody went, wait, what?
Well, no,
So
Josh, and I agree. Maybe I'm not saying every case, right? But this case in particular, huge win.
Okay.
Right?
I think anything that's getting, like, especially from a medical side or IoT side, anything that's getting money behind it and publicity to the awareness. We know cybersecurity is important. Companies know cybersecurity is important. We've gotten to the point where companies are investing in cybersecurity. However, the cost of devices and our ability to churn out devices very, very quickly, and the cost and time of ownership has still not reached that precipice, especially within inside the medical field. So I think we're kind of at that tipping point where if we're going to get some publicity, I think that's going to help, just like ransomware is helping corporate networks put some budget behind having to do some of these things. Devices, I think, are going to have to be the same effort. But consumers, at the end of the day, are going to go with whatever their insurance pays for, whatever is the cheapest, and whatever hospitals and companies are pitching based on. It's almost like lobbying. You know, companies that have reps that come in and exclusively offer their particular products or RX or whatever it might be for that particular hospital. So are we any better off?
But Tyler, I'm okay with that. So as long as they're held to a standard, so that when there is a vulnerability, in this particular vulnerability, an attacker has to be close to the victim, and the victim has to ignore the pump's alerts indicating that a remote, they call it a bolus, is like the
Ballast.
A bolus is the what is that? The informational communication that tells the insulin pump to deliver medicine or not, correct?
Yeah, it's the place that stores the fluid that's going to be told how much to actually pump.
Right. And so as long as we're holding manufacturers to the standard, I'm all for, like, what is the best treatment, the cheapest treatment. Like, cost is certainly a factor, but hold them to a standard that it has to have integrity, right? And that's what happened.
Do we
in this
have
case.
that standard within inside of, like? I feel like that's not been addressed in the same way that things like ICS or PII.
I agree.
Like data has that standard, but we have not put those standards. You know, the closest thing I can think is like EC or one of the power regulation standards that just speaks to how the power is being consumed and utilized. So I think once we get to that point where we can put some regulation behind that, maybe that's through one of those entities like EPRI that is helping govern something like IEEE, then I don't see this.
But this directly impacts patient care, right? Whereas maybe an ICS device, I mean, it could certainly, but I don't think it's looked upon
more.
As that.
It's less large scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's promising, and it's an opportunity. I think the biggest challenge that we're going to have is the same challenge that we've had with every other industry that's embracing cybersecurity as an important issue, and that is, it is not just a one-time investment, it's an ongoing investment. We usually get attention for the one-time investment, but then people come back and go, okay, what's fixed, right? And we're like, wait, the threat landscape changes, and, and we don't do a good job of that part of it, frankly.
That's setting the expectations in communication, right, Joff? Like, that's the message doing has been wrong from the beginning of let's get secure as opposed to let's consistently maintain security. and that's an ongoing thing. I think clients have a disillusion of this one-time investment, or call it a 3 to 5 year plan. Like they think they can have a 3 to 5 year plan with enough blinky lights to be secure, to have a lower cost of ownership over the next 3 to 5 years. That doesn't ever work.
I think we need to do a better job of explaining why it's an ongoing investment, not just saying, hey guys, it's an ongoing investment. Because when we just go out there and say, hey, it's an ongoing investment, they're like, yeah, right. And they have that reaction like, yeah, you're just trying to maintain your income in your industry. It's like, well, okay, maybe there's an aspect of that, but no, here's why, and actually paint the picture of the ongoing threat landscape and how and why it changes, and be honest with people. There are some knowns and there's some unknowns, and just, really be vulnerable. And we're not good at that.
But Joff, I love what you're saying, because it's really underscoring the point that we can't just pay attention to security like once. It has to be an ongoing thing. And like so many of us that work in security know that. And I think we have an uphill battle to fight to convey that to the right players, that security is not just like something you do once or even twice. Like, it's a mindset, it's a culture, it's something you have to continually work at to make a secure and resilient product. And when you put that in the context of something that is a device delivering medicine to a patient, there is, in my opinion, no greater kind of use case for security. Has to be something we always are thinking about.
Yeah.
Well, how else do we keep job security?
But also, but Jeff mentioned that too, right? Like, it's job security, but it's also patient care in the safety of human beings as well.
The biggest win here is that if we can align it with human safety, then it will get funded, right? Because nobody gets more motivated than, oh no, your patient's going to die unless you do this. I mean, that's as serious as it gets. Once we come out of alignment with that we're going to have a harder battle to fight. But that ongoing maintenance is an important aspect to this that we need to do a better job of selling, and we just really don't in all industries, frankly.
And, economically, we can get away with it in some instances, right? When it comes to healthcare, it's inexcusable. But when we talk about things like Apple Pay, being hacked, economically, we can recover from that. And then that segues into another story, right? Like, I don't know if you read the research from, was it Pentest Partners that did the Apple Pay?
I think so.
Visa, I think it was Pentest Partners, right?
Yes.
Yeah, from the locked Apple device.
Yeah.
But there was a loophole. It was Apple in conjunction with Visa, and I implore our listeners to go read the article that I linked to, because it was really good. But it was like a use case where, I mean, we all know, a lot of us have developed software and designed software, right? Like, it's a loophole where you're like, oh, there's users that need to take public transit, and we don't want like long lines for people to board public transit. So therefore, we don't want them to enter a PIN code or do a biometric. We just want them to be able to pay the low cost amount. And I understand this from a design perspective, like a low cost, like dollar amount. I say dollar in the US, but a low cost currency amount to board public transit shouldn't require like two different factors of authentication to authorize that transaction. I want to go scan my phone and I want to go hop on the train. I get that. What I believe it Pentest Partners, right, figured out was that they could make the transaction look like it was for public transit, but really in the back end, it was a payment for a much higher amount, and they could kind of fool the system. And it was just a really amazing kind of hack in that they were able to emulate a public transit ticket that was like, hey, pay this amount, but it was a much higher amount, and put some basically kind of hackery in that tricked your phone to make it was a public transit, but really it was $1,000 that they were getting from your phone, kind of thing. And it was really it was interesting. It was a magic byte that said like, hey, this transaction is public transit, therefore don't ask the user for their PIN code.
And they were able to relay that
from
someone else, right? Like it didn't even have to be a stolen iPhone that you used. You could actually take the signal and relay that from another phone while they were doing a transit payment. Isn't that how I was reading some of that?
Yeah, it was. There was this article was pretty deep.
And then if you set one more bit, the CTQ bit that says essentially this has been authenticated by the device or a fingerprint, you can get, basically full limit, full big dollar transactions, not the little ones that are for the transit system tickets. It's crazy.
I think this is only the start of there's not been a ton of research on contactless payment systems, and I think everybody's been using them. There's been a lot of scrutiny on them, but we haven't seen a ton of attacks because I think it's largely smoke and mirrors from the transactional side, as well as closed loop devices that make it very difficult to do some of this research. Like looking into some of this, like the back end side of just getting visibility into packets takes an extraordinary amount of setup just to get to that.
Right, and the user can turn off the express travel card mode in Apple Pay. But then they lose their ability to do the legitimate transactions as well. But it might be worth it to just do that.
Did Apple fix this? I'm not. That was one thing I didn't get to in the article. Was like, did Apple actually how do you fix this issue? Right, like they're basically spoofing and tricking your phone into a certain transaction type that doesn't require that you unlock your phone with a PIN code and or a biometric to do this transaction. How do you fix that?
I would say they haven't fixed it yet because it's their Apple Pay implementation.
So it says
theoretically these are legitimate signals for an EMV card, and the EMV cards aren't vulnerable. So it's got to be something in Apple's implementation. The last update they released didn't have any CVE fixes at all. So
yeah, it says in the article from one of the researchers, I believe, says, I find it amazing Apple and Visa are arguing about who should fix the issue. And in the meantime, they advise that disable the payment mode until Visa and Apple sort it out. Settings, wallet and Apple Pay, Express travel card, and disable that in your phone. That's good advice. Sounds like to me. Also, Apple related, the always on processor magic, how Find My iPhone works while your phone is powered off. I think we've all been look.
I've wondered this from day one.
But look, also, right, this is a newer feature from what this article said, Tyler, but many of us have children. And whether you have young children or teenage children, all of them lose their phone, all the time. And they're also really bad about charging their devices as well. I don't know what it is about this generation. I feel like
they don't get power. They don't get how power works.
Us older folks are my phone's at 50%. I need to charge it. I'm really freaked out. I need to charge it. Dave Kennedy has been hopping on this for years. So if people post a screenshot and your battery's almost low, he's I'm really worried for you now, dude. Right? I've been in the car with Dave Kennedy and he's my phone's only at 56%. He's Paul, do you have a charger? I need to charge my phone, right? We all want to really charge our phones and make sure they're at full capacity because we rely on them for so much stuff. And what's interesting is, I can see Apple engineers knowing this, and probably them having children of their own going, no one charges their devices, so we need to be able to find the device if it's lost power. And they've developed a system. What do they call it? What does AOP stand for? I knew I was going to lose this in the article when I added it. It's the
always on power.
Always on power. Thank you very much, Tyler. There is this thing that inside your phone, there are certain subsystems in your phone where this always on power can power on Bluetooth and or Wi-Fi in these various subsystems inside your phone, so that even if your battery's dead, air quotes dead, it can still power.
That's why your battery has to have a chip. you got 20% in there that it's going to utilize.
That's exactly what this article is describing, Tyler, right? Like the chips are controlling, like your battery is really not dead. Like it's really only dead when it has 5% power, and it's utilizing that. I'm just making that number up, right? 5% power to make sure that it's using whatever's left on your battery to power a Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or some other wireless, some subsystem in your phone to make sure it stays on so that Find My iPhone still works.
Or when you push the power button 10 times and it pops up saying you got to put the charger in, like, how's the screen still working?
Right,
yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and you think that's bad if you ever buy a Tesla like I did, that's not supposed to be a flex, but your charge anxiety goes way through the
roof. That is my, like, I really want a Tesla. Like, I really want to buy a Tesla. But I know even, I'm not as bad as my children, but, like, charging my devices is like a thing. Like I have a lot of battery packs from my phones and like other devices, and like my laptop will charge over USB-C, and so I bought like all kinds of USB chargers and cables to make sure I always have with me the ability to like charge my laptop or my phone or my headset or whatever it is. And I'm like, how does that translate to a car? Like, because I know, like, I can always drive to a gas station, but like when you charge your car, like that's a different thing.
It's a way different thing, and actually there is an emerging market for emergency vehicle services to have portable, large battery packs.
I was telling I was theorizing about this with my family because my kids and my wife, they're kind of like pushing me now, like, Dad, when are you going to buy a Tesla? I'm like, I'm gonna, like, I want one, like or an electric vehicle of some kind, right? And I'm like, there has to be something that's created to have like the equivalent of the battery pack for your phone, but for your car, right?
Yeah. No, it's an emerging market.
As soon as they get that satellite wireless up that calls home to then VPN a connection code to send a battery pack charge via satellite. That's what's going to happen.
Oh yeah, Tyler. Yeah, no,
sure.
No. If you monitor your, so Paul, talk to me first if you're going to do it, because
I will. Yeah,
I want to be the guy that not only gives you a little advice, but also does the recommendation to get me 1,000 miles.
I've talked to John Strand and Dave Kennan, like, you know, they've. How much speed do you need is a question, right? Like,
yeah.
Do you need to be the Plaid that goes like less than 2 seconds, 0 to 60? I don't know.
Look, honestly, I bought a Model Y, and the damn thing is so fucking fast. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous.
Right.
And so, you know, do you need to do 0 to 60 in 5 seconds or less? Well, Model Y is going to do it for you.
Yeah.
Right. Do you need to do it in 2 seconds? Well, you're going to have to upgrade to an S or a Plaid or whatever.
Right.
You know,
but then what happens to your battery? Like, it's going to
you kill your battery if you're going to do that all the time, but you will also beat everything else on the road hands down, right? Including the cop.
You also have to think about all the data that they are collecting, and like the reason they can subsidize a lot of this from the get-go is they're calculating road conditions for up and down, when it rains, and which GPS location. They're getting satellite imagery of on grounds footage for all these things. Like all of this data is getting sold out. That's how they subsidize.
Yeah, if you choose to participate. But yes, you're absolutely right. The damn thing is a mobile supercomputer on wheels. I shit you not.
No,
it has got so many cameras on it. It's just nuts. So it's an experience. But
there's also, I was on the phone with my wife when I was driving back from soccer practice, and there was a gas-powered Porsche that was driving like a jerk, passing everyone, driving 90 miles an hour, and I'm like, this is why I need a Tesla now.
This is why you need the Tesla, right? You could have put him down.
Put him down. Smoke him. And got a speeding ticket, maybe got into an accident in the process, but that's not the point.
Yeah, I've got to make one last comment on this, and this is so geeky nerdy. When I bought the Tesla, it's got wireless charging when you lay your phone in the center console.
It charges your phone wirelessly.
Yes, correct.
Mm-hmm.
So my OnePlus at the time did not have wireless charging. So what did I do?
You upgraded
my phone.
Your phone. I mean, that makes sense.
Because you bought the Tesla, yeah.
These are first world problems. Like, my electric car doesn't charge my next generation wireless phone.
Yeah. Same goes. I know Paul can relate to this. I bought a wireless lock for the side of my house because I didn't have to carry keys anymore because the Tesla key is the phone. And so I don't
I have a question, John. What happens if the battery dies in your phone and you want to get in your car? What are your options?
As long as you've got your wallet in the pocket with the RF chip card in it, you're okay.
So there's backup options for that.
Yeah, there's backup.
Okay. Yeah. I want to also talk about the what is the company with text messages?
That's
Cineverse.
Yes.
Cineverse. Lee had this story as well as I, and they route all of your text messages. They were hacked. My question is, the way I understand Signal works is that my text messages between us, because we all use Signal, they would be encrypted end to end, right? With Signal.
Right.
Correct.
But that's through Signal's system.
Right.
That's not the S7 SMS messaging on the back end of a cellular provider.
So wait, when we send messages over Signal, does it not go over the SMS back end? It goes over Signal's back end? It goes over Signal's back end. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
I got you.
Right. It's different.
So but this is a huge resounding endorsement for you, Signal, then.
Oh,
one
SMS. Well, you think about SMS. So the real big issue here, you think about when this happened. This happened kind of during all of the Facebook and WhatsApp and all the BS that was going on. You think about two-factor and the fallback mechanisms that a lot of these companies force you to use. There's not a lot of configuration for most consumer two-factor outside of SMS backup. SMS is still the de facto backup for banking or even Gmail.
Right, because my bank sends me a lot of two-factor will send it over SMS, not Signal. Correct. Yeah. Okay.
And you cannot configure that.
Right.
And it's not iMessage or the other internet-based options either. It's real SMS. That's the problem.
And also in that vein, Lee, giving Apple kudos for privacy as well. I mean, they're big privacy, proponents. So, I do want to say, completely organically, I found this article that the company that routes billions of text messages says it was hacked, and someone is quoted in the press as saying, "Seems like a state-sponsored wet dream." And then I wonder who that was. And then I read the article, Adrian Sanabria, a cybersecurity expert and founder of Security Weekly Labs. That's the quote that it came from. I messaged Adrian immediately, and I'm like, first of all, Adrian, that was an awesome quote. I'm like, secondly, I found that completely organically. Like, I had no idea Adrian had provided this quote to the press. I'm glad that he did, because it underscores part of the problem. Right? Like, if you, as a nation state, are able to intercept communications, this is the kind of stuff that's been happening for decades. And
telco is the primary target for a good portion of nation state communication threat actors because of SMS, not because of telephone calls anymore. Like, most of that's handled by VoIP, and that's end-to-end encryption with additional modules and additional, like, if you're doing this and you're really trying to be secure, there's a lot going into that. SMS, though, is still one of the things that the older generation still sends interesting stuff over SMS, and there are a lot of two-factor authentication mechanisms still using SMS. And the fact that this has been 5 years, like the 5-year piece was like that time to dwell for a threat actor is a big deal. 5 years, that's a lot of SMS for this kind of network.
I mean,
talk about your big data.
You could date this type of communications back to messages before the telephone system. Were they telegrams? What was that? Before telephones, before voice communications, right? Was it am I getting the word?
No,
right?
you're right. You're right.
It's telegrams,
it's the wire
right?
transfer company, right?
Western Union, right? Like
Western
telegrams,
Union,
yeah. And they were like
telegrams.
laughing at the telephone company until Alexander Graham Bell created he was like voice could be communicated over these wires, right? And everyone like laughed him out of the room and told him it was impossible. Like this dates back to like over 100 years, right? It's the same thing. Crazy.
Oh.
What else?
So, do we want to talk about ESXi and Python?
Pretty amazing, right? Like ESXi is a Linux-based system, right, that implements Python. So, like, why wouldn't you write your malware or backdoor in Python? And that's essentially what this was.
Wow.
Well, it's not just that is ransomware, right?
That is prescient because I don't know what happened to my camera. It's gone crappy. But anyway, I've written some malware in Python. That's all I'm going to say.
Like, why not? Right?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
ESXi for ransomware groups has been like it's built into 3 of the major kits already. And you start to think about your ability to encrypt data at scale very quickly. You don't have to actually go to all of the things that require access, such as CIF shares, NFS shares, different DFS shares. All of those things take access. If you can gain access to VMware, do it at the Power CLI and encrypt the VDMKs or even just the VMXs at scale at the vSphere level, you've basically taken over an organization and they have no access to not only the data and the recovery, but the systems that then restore it, Active Directory and authentication. You start to think about even routing.
But you get underneath all those layers, Tyler.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. ESXi is a very soft point. In fact, we've been working on an engagement and an assessment for this for the better part of 5 years. And we're just starting to get to the point where we're identifying all of these soft and vulnerable points that threat actors are now utilizing in order to, as pen testers or red teamers, ESXi and vSphere has been a target since 3.5 for us. Like it's a bad day. It's gotten worse because of orchestration.
But I think it's here to stay as we, look at designs for implementing production, for example. We can't be like in the cloud because it still has to be local, but we can virtualize it. And I think there's a lot of use cases that are not cloud, but they're not physical computers, and that means you're ESXi, right? Like,
well, think about domain controllers, right? Like that's one of the big juicy targets. Like most people, even if they're using Azure AD and they're doing a hybrid approach with an AD connector or an MSOL account, the DCs are still living inside of the organization, and those are almost always virtualized. Like there's almost no one doing bare metal implementations of servers anymore because of the cost of ownership and the scalability. So it's always going to be an ESXi server, and the orchestration for things like VDI, NSX, even Zero Trust now is being laid on top of this ESXi. So ESXi, you get all the way down to the bare bones where all of the security controls are now gone. And that's a very, very juicy target and something that we're just going to see a ton more of this.
My brain went to like, how are they encrypting? Like, are they encrypting the file system through ESXi?
They're encrypting the files at the file system level
because it's software. Like it's just a file, or you know what I mean? Like
yeah. Or I mean, you take that one step further and you start to think about how iSCSI LUNs are implemented across ESXi hosts in a cluster that then has failover capacities. You start to encrypt one host and then take away the ESXi failover clustering that happens over an iSCSI channel. And you've now basically broken the DRS chain for most organizations. All of their failover and backup mirror sites, even for things like, call it a SAN, something like a Dell Equal Logic, that mirror site and failover for DRS is going to fail because the iSCSI LUN happens at the ESXi level, and you've broken that. It's a bad day.
Mm-hmm. So it's funny you say that, because I was recently testing. I have to choose these words carefully, and like Tyler said, one of our favorite targets, if you get privilege in the environment, is ESX, right? Because if you go after the virtualized infrastructure, there are all kinds of things to do. And one of the things that has been done is to just spin up a new image. If you've got enough privilege, mount the LUNs of the disks of various things there and go to town, right? Just spin up a Linux image, right? And have fun.
Yeah, so you can do that all with like Power CLI, with Python, from Windows, from Linux. I mean, we've done this by implanting stuff on printers that had access to management networks to ESXi. Like, ESXi ends up in very interesting locations on the network with some interesting access that is not typically granted. Like, you may be segmented off, but what gets segmented into those networks also is not always thought of as critical assets because of who's accessing.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly
it's kind of like a, almost like a mainframe model, but also like a privileged container model, right? Like once you get
they're VMware admins, they're kind of like
you get your foothold. You can create something that has access to all the resources because the storage and the network is all in software at that point.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's just another example, and we're going to continue to see this in the industry where the control plane continues to migrate to software and to being able to be virtually accessed versus having to be physically accessed. And there's always going to be danger there when you do that.
So groups are using that for ransomware, but also ransomware gangs are complaining that other crooks are stealing their ransoms, which I thought was really funny. Like, if there ever was there's no honor among thieves. Like, basically, do you license ransomware? Like, are they like a Microsoft model? Like, I license your Revel ransomware.
Oh, you 100% do. You get a UUID and you get a client ID that ties to your ransomware.
Yeah.
Like, I think these are the millennials in the ransomware groups that have
like
that
it's a product. Like, where's my product code, right? Like, I license this ransomware software. I can enter my product ID key in there, but really the Revel group also maintains backdoor access. And the story that I put there was like, I create ransomware software. I license it to Tyler. Tyler is ransomwaring someone for $7 million. I have a backdoor in that system, and I'm like, $7 million, like, that's a lot of money. So guess what? I'm going to collect that ransom instead of Tyler. And that's what they're doing.
And you know what's worse? You're not going to give him a participation trophy.
No, I'm taking the $7 million. It's all mine. Tax free. Like, criminals don't pay taxes. Taxes? Pfft.
I was wondering about that because you read about, like, they ransom it out. They license it to an affiliate in exchange for 15% of the ransom. I'm thinking, why would they just take a fraction? I mean, why not?
Why would they take it all,
thing?
Right, Lee?
Just take it all. Yeah.
But although I've heard it's really damn profitable to be in that business. Unless you're storing your stuff in Coinbase.
Yeah, what was your article about Coinbase, Lee?
So what happened is, like, 6 months ago, Coinbase had a breach. A lot of their user lists got out. And,
there's more than user lists, Lee.
I mean, well, it's more than that, but basically information about their users. I was just being lazy. And then the users are being contacted by phishing emails to reset their account to maintain the security of their Coinbase, and that those who've got their account protected by SMS verifications, and they're intercepting the SMS, and basically there's an inappropriate authentication check on the SMS reset, so the attackers were able to grab their accounts, move their money out. They got about 6,000 people. Coinbase fixed their flaw, but hello.
But also that segues into our other stories where the U.S. government is really, I think, kind of hot to trot on transparency in who's paying ransoms, right? I don't know if this is the right strategy. They're really big on like information sharing in the fact that if a company pays a ransom, that I have to report that I paid a ransom. Like it's very much report. It's not about detection or prevention. It's like the reporting phase. Like, oh, I've been hacked, and therefore I have to report that I paid a ransom. It moves the needle, but not in the same ways that I think other regulations might move the needle. However, in this example, from what I've read, and Lee, you had very similar articles, right? That if I'm a company, I get ransomwared, I pay them $1 million, I then have to disclose that I did that. Does that how much does that help?
Is that even legal? Like first,
yeah, right. Is that legal? If you're publicly, but hold on, if you're publicly traded company,
you have to do that anyway.
You have to do that anyway. Right.
So the fact that they're wanting insight into private business and the proliferation of ransom paid and or breaches.
But you said right in your statement, Tyler, private business.
Private business.
It's not private. It's not private anymore.
As an American corporation, if you're not publicly traded, that's like basically opening up your books and saying, who are your vendors? Who are your customers?
Yeah, if your vendors are ransomware gang, you have to disclose that.
Yeah. Oh. I disagree with it. I see why they're trying to do it. They want to get visibility. And I see the intent behind it to an extent, but there's a lot of intent behind that from a U.S. government standpoint that has other implications that other entities within inside the U.S. government will use. So I disagree with how they're doing that. I think that cyber insurance is trying to do some of the same thing within inside of internal risk management groups that makes a lot more sense without disclosing private information that is highly sensitive to a private business, especially a private business that does very private things with specific vendors.
It makes you wonder though, if there's laws, if I'm a company and I have to pay someone off, do I have to disclose that? Whether it was ransomware or not. If I'm a private business and I got to pay someone off, I don't have to disclose that. But if it's in the air quotes cyber realm, now I have to disclose that. That
makes a lot of things fall under cyber realm. That has a lot of other implications. You start to think about this from a hacker mindset. How can I get information into customers and vendors of a particular competitor by utilizing something like this was in the cyber realm, this falls underneath of ransomware, or who they've actually paid with inside the cyber realm. This starts to be an avalanche effect of insight into private business. Private business in and of itself is private. They can line item who they pay for what they pay as long as they line item the dollar amount to anybody. I think when we start to break that down and get visibility into private companies, we become China.
It's weird. Is an expense that I can write off? I got a line item for bribery and extortion payments. Is that a line item on my taxes?
Ransomware becomes a loss to a corporate line item if done in a certain way, which is why a lot of people use brokerages where they pay.
It's a consultant fee. I paid consultants, right?
It is.
Yeah.
100%. In fact, I've dealt with these line items. In fact, I've paid these line items for companies where it is a consultancy fee and they handle the brokerage, purchase the Bitcoin underneath their account.
Right.
And 100% legal. This is how business is done, but it is not necessarily.
Like as a business, you can hire a consultant for anything and pay them X amount of dollars, and it's for whatever services. If that service happens to be a ransomware payment, how can you force private business to disclose that?
It's breach counsel is what it's called. Like, I hate to call out a stupid freaking segment in our cyber culture that we've kind of come into, but breach counsel is a fancy term for lawyer doing negotiation with ransomware in order to obtain money purchased on the dark web to do shady shit. Like, that's stupid.
So one of the interesting things, I mean, I've been watching some of this for a little bit, and I mean, it started with, critical infrastructure requiring the CISA wants them to partner and share information about security processes and work together as a community to raise the bar, which is a far cry from having to report every breach. I know that. I just think that's where we started, and working together works. And in fact, in the IOP space, Dragos had communication working where everybody's anonymous unless you decide to work one-on-one with somebody and agree to not be anonymous. Otherwise, you have the information, but it's not Joe.com got a ransomware or something. It's just somebody had an issue and they can call on others in the community for help.
Which is why CISA is actually making a difference, right? Like, they're respected in the community. I would trust CISA to share data with, as does many organizations. Right. And the fact that CISA's overreach now has actually overflowed into the private sector, where they're looking at things outside of government, such as pharmaceuticals, like, that speaks to the volume of respect and care that they're starting to try and build that trust through that long-term kind of commitment to being private and doing this in the right manner. I think by forcing people, you're going to end up with a shit show.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, right? And I do respect what CISA is doing. They're doing it the right way, I think. And I would echo what Tyler's saying. It's a very careful. Do you guys remember, like, stepping back, probably 5, maybe even 10 years, where the FBI tried to kind of intersect with the hacker community a lot, and do a little bit of what CISA's doing now, and it didn't really work. It backfired, right? So CISA's doing. I don't know. I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but CISA's doing a good job.
I mean, I was looking at that exactly when I was my number 3 story, where it talks about the critical rail air company is supposed to report hacks or name cyber chiefs. I think it's awesome that they're asked to name a cyber chief, that they are having to have an incident response plan. We all ought to have incident response plan, and then and improve your cyber practices. Well, you need a standard, but okay, yeah, great. But to inform the government when their network's been breached, I'm starting to go over the edge there.
I think that's tough.
Call me up and I'll help you when you have a problem is different. This, that's where I was thinking the CISA role would be, ring us up and we'll help you out. But
yeah, I think
it's a response to like creating regulation where you have to secure your network, which is very arbitrary and very subjective. So they're going towards like, don't define like, we're not going to make you say what security really is and what it means and hold you to that standard. But if you are breached, we're going to make you either disclose that or share that information with your peers. That's kind of interesting. I don't know that it's going to, how much difference that's going to make, right?
No. Like I said, you got to help people with a good security bar, but then don't go overboard.
Joff, I don't know if I see you talking, but I don't hear you.
Let me try that again.
Yeah.
It's a trust thing, and I agree with Lee's assessment on this. It's all in the phrasing. Don't say you need to report if you're breached. Rephrase it as, if you need help, we have resources to help you. And
that's the difference between DOJ though and like what CIS is doing, right? Like, this is DOJ making a big push for, like, DOJ is always a play. I don't care like how you phrase it. if you don't make a big case and you don't have some big political agenda for DOJ, you don't get either the re-election or the political stat that
you're not going to get any attention. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I CISA has a role to play there, though, in reaching out and actually helping. And I do believe the information they're putting out, even to date, has been really pretty good, high-quality stuff.
A couple more vulnerabilities to round things out. There's a proof-of-concept exploit for Dahua cameras. This one's interesting because basically you include some very specific things in your request to these cameras, and it bypasses authentication. We've seen this like a million times in IoT devices, and very much my story number 3. Excuse me. Also, Apache has a 0 day. Excuse me. In this, sorry, tickle in my throat.
Yeah.
The Apache one is basically a directory traversal that allows you to read files. If you read through the whole thing, like my assessment is this could be really useful for reading configuration files that have database passwords or API keys. If you like, you read the Apache one as an attacker, and you're like, oh.
Wait, what year is this?
Yeah. This is like 10, 15 years ago, right? Like, I can bypass authentication with specific requests, or I can specifically craft a request and read arbitrary files like Etsy password. Or that was the example that I saw on Twitter. But in the Apache example, like I'm reading files like for WordPress or other popular software applications that in clear text store the database username, password, or API keys to other things. Like that was the total use case for me in these particular vulnerabilities. Apache
I just had to make a comment about Tyler because I love him to death. But Tyler, haven't you realized it's all the same? It's just another year.
It's so true. Like you can read the CVE number like 2021 41773 and apply like what I
2010.
Oh God! Like I become enamored with. You can develop like a really secure web application. However, if you're running a vulnerable web server, like you're going to get popped if it has this
screwed anyway.
Or configuration, right? Like configuration vulnerabilities in your web server can undermine the security of your web app. And then when I read this, I was like, that's totally true.
It's hard to like to figure out. Like we're still at the same phase where we have macros as the default initial access, password sprays, 2FA bypasses. Like they're making us not work to be the edgy hackers and be creative in the sense we're pulling shit off of wires from attenuation signal off of Cat 6. Like I feel like we need to be better, and we're not.
Man, stop trying to make work for us, man. Come on.
Well, fortunately for Tyler's employers, CISA just released a toolkit for evaluating insider threat.
Is that the one that's like? Is that the one?
I want to know how they're doing this.
Is that the one's like several hundred meg of a download?
If it's insider threat, I would hope it's that big, because that is a hard. Like we've dealt with this problem, like from FBI profilers all the way down to like psychologists. And like the ability to find insider threat based on behavioral activity prior to a breach is not easy, and it's not an easy problem to solve from a technological standpoint.
Yeah, I believe it was a good sized download. I didn't get a chance to play with it much, but it looks like, hey, it's asking good questions for small medium business. They don't always know what to ask, and I thought this was pretty cool. Give you an idea of what to think about, and gives you ideas on what to do.
Do you pay your employees well? Do they have good benefits? Are you within sight of the industry standard for the job position and work that they are doing?
Well, you start with the basics, but then there's other stuff they've learned because of all the people that are forced to report to them. I mean, of all the data they collected.
That's like it's like one of the soft problems in security, right? Darknet Diaries did a great episode on the Tesla employee that was targeted by insider threat, right? There was a Russian actor that befriended this person. And like what brought it to life for me was when the Tesla employee and the Russian actor and other like friends within the circle went on like a trip to like go somewhere, like hung out for a weekend, and the Russian spy was basically like, I can't be in your group photo, right? And the Tesla employee was like, went to his management and was like, this person wants me to install software on systems within Tesla to leak information, and collaborated with the FBI, and that I believe the Russian actor was arrested in this story, right? But like insider threat, Tyler, to your point, is like treating your employees good, like giving them incentives to do the right thing, rather than like a Russian actor drops off like a few $100,000 in cash on your doorstep, and you're like, yeah, I'm totally gonna backdoor the code, or plug this USB thumb drive into systems at my employer for this couple $100,000 or $1 million or whatever, right? And that's what insider threat comes down to. Is like, I give props to Tesla and this employee. I forget which Darknet Diaries episode it was, but it was really great. Like, they actually thwarted this attack against Tesla. That was, Joff, to your point, you own a Tesla, right? Like, they thwarted this attack through the employee just being like, I don't want the Russians to infiltrate Tesla. Yeah.
Well, everybody's vulnerable, right? Yeah. I mean, this is phishing on steroids.
Yeah.
If you think about it. And you throw, what it comes down to, what's your threshold? You may be a really moral, patriotic person, but everybody has a price, as they say in the movies, right? I mean, where is your threshold? If somebody came to you tomorrow and said, look, I give you $50 million, what's your price?
Yeah.
Most people will do it for $1 million.
I agree, Tyler.
A lot less than that.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think there's also like a heroism to it where, I'm not going to accept that money, but I want to do the right thing, right? Like, you got to live with the fact that you've accepted money to do a morally and unethical thing. And I think there's a lot of cases where people choose to do the moral and ethical thing.
They can do that when the company respects them as an individual, and
when
they're in a position of security with inside that employer. Mm-hmm. That is one of the biggest things that we found when we're looking at insider threat, was the fact that they are secure in where they're at and what they're doing, and that they are part of a bigger picture that they agree with from the employer side. They realize that there's other people that they care about, the employer cares about them, and that they're doing work that matters.
Yeah. Like, I can go on and get like a really good salary and do work that matters, and I love my job, or I can risk basically going to prison to accept this thing, right? Like, that's a thing for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and I didn't mean to try to oversimplify it from the perspective of what's your price. I do, and I am an optimist here, I do believe that the majority of people fundamentally have the right intentions. And will do the right things. But it is important, and Tyler points this out, that your employer treats you as somebody with value and as somebody that is respected. It's not even always about the money.
Right. Yeah. Agreed. Agreed, John.
Yeah.
Well, I think that will conclude this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time. Over and out.